Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Partha Chakravarti. I am the head of security architecture, engineering, and innovation at health insurance plus healthcare company Humana. And I am joined with Sunil, and I will let him go and introduce himself real quick. Quick about my background, I have been mostly in Wall Street financial companies, JP Morgan Bank and some Canadian banks as well. This is my first stint at healthcare, and in healthcare we deal with multiple cloud providers. We have like more than 3 CSPs, so this topic is very near to our heart, and we thought that okay, let's share this thing. I do teach at Northwestern University. I do teach 3 cybersecurity courses over there as an adjunct professor. I am associated with Cloud Security Alliance. I'm the chair for their key management chapter, and I will let Sunil to go over, just introduce himself, and then we will get started on the topic.
Thank you, Partha. Hello everyone, my name is Sunil Arora. I'm working as Associate Director for Security Architecture at Humana, and in my terms of education, I have MS in Cybersecurity and Information Assurance. Currently, I'm pursuing my PhD in Cyber Defense, and I also participate in multiple profit, non-profit, community services, including ISC2, CSA, ISACA, and so on and so forth, in terms of a publication and contributing to the overall security community. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Sunil. So, cloud and platform agnostic security posture management. We came up with this term, XSPM. X can be anything. And what is the objective of this presentation is that first, this world we live in with all cloud and non-cloud solution, it's full of point and present solutions, and there are a lot of jargons in this place. So at least looking at from an enterprise buyer perspective, we work on the enterprise side, and we have to be an effective shopper to buy the right technology. So it is important to understand what those terminologies and tools mean, and where there is an overlap. Can one tool be extended to the other space? Is there any other alternative other than buying those solutions? Can I have a tool consolidation, or can I look at it from a platform perspective? Can I build something? Is it very difficult to build, or I have to rely on all those solutions that we need to buy? So though it is sort of an oxymoron like what I'm saying right now, I wanted to de-jargonize the security posture management world, and in order to do that I used another jargon which is called XSPM. But what we are going to do is that, and okay, that's okay. So what we are going to cover is what is the security posture management space, what are the differences in scope and application and architectural aspects of different security posture management, what are the things which are available today, right? And also, if we look beyond buying something, if we think about building, even as an enterprise customer, what are the options? I mean, we have a real life story, and the story is where we work, both of us. We did not go for a commercial cloud security posture management solution. So we took a different route for many different reasons. We built actually our CSPM solution, and that investment is paying off because the platform that we built, yes, we may not have 300 to 500 features that other commercial tools are providing, but in our case, we probably don't need those. That is why we identified what we need, and we built accordingly what we need. And we do have some differentiator. We could prove any of the commercial providers that when we detect and react and respond to that, our response time is less than 2 minutes compared to the other CSPMs, which could take up to 10 minutes in terms of detection to remediation. So we will go over that use case, and also when we build that solution or platform, that platform was extended to solve some of the other use cases as well. Now, this presentation is definitely not saying that you have to build or whatever we build is good. There are commercial providers which are very feature rich, but in this presentation, what we are going to cover about the different jargons, scope, applicable area, and also the architectural differences. And if we need to standardize and build something in-house, we will talk about the example, what we did and how we extended, how we can expand it beyond what's available to solve any of the security control or tool or technologies, posture management challenges. So, security posture management, very basic thing, and I'm not going to spend more time here. Why it is needed? Because the landscape is so dynamic and so much changing every time. New threat vectors are coming in, and we need to have a continuous monitoring and have a tab on the systems that we are running. Anytime there is something detected which is definitely not according to our normal expected behavior, we want to get alerted and get early on the detection and the remediation phase. At the same time, we need to have the right level of coordination so that whatever we are finding that is on the runtime, which is shift right or central, if you look at the umbrella type coverage, we have to do those learning and we have to push it further left in the shift left mode, and we have to improve and define those policies, and so that the runtime detection gets lesser as we go on and implement those solutions. There are a couple of posture management solutions available in the market. I'm sure you all are familiar with that. Something which is not listed here, which I came across very recently, and somebody started terming a coin called KSPM, or Kubernetes Security Posture Management Solution. Bottom line is that you can find any technology, any tool, and have an SPM, and that becomes the solution where people would like to invest and get an answer and address some of the problems they have. So, yes, we talked about that, why we need this. This is a comparison, and then we will go a little bit deeper between the peers, like the cloud security, posture management, application, data, identity. I did not include the Kubernetes, and it can get expanded. Again, the goal was to get ourselves a little bit familiar with, and so that we can just de-jargonize those things, right? The focus area in CSPM, as we all know, it is focusing on the cloud and the cloud resources that we spin up, right? Most of the time we are dealing with IS, and the tools that cover into the CSPM space, they are very good at detecting and alerting, in many cases also remediating if we allow them to do so. In the IAS space, not so effective completely in the PaaS space, and does not have the ability to do in the SaaS space, because the SaaS vendors will not open up the APIs or many of the internal things to remediate those. And that is why on the extreme right hand side, another group of products came out, SSPM, and for SaaS security posture management, they use a different technology. They have, in some cases, some API, in some cases, a combination of technologies available to detect any drift, which can actually deviate you from your organization risk and compliance posture. Application security posture management is on the other side, as the name suggests, focuses on all the applications, APIs, and everything related to the application, which could be on-prem, or it can be in the cloud hosted environment as well. Data security posture management is on the name suggests data protection rules, right? Do I have the right level of data classification? Do I have the right data discovery? Do we know if we are running, for example, like we as healthcare, we have multiple cloud service providers, right? And I worked in financials almost like 16, 17 years. Financials are not that diverse. Like they try to stick into one single provider, maybe talking about second or doing something in the second. But in healthcare, you will find 3 to 4 cloud service providers for a different reason is prevalent, right? It's more complexity by design. So when you are having multiple cloud security providers, where do we have our data? And if we are dealing with the complexities like GDPR and all, it is very important to know which cloud service provider has how much data. So having a good data classification, governance, and discovery is paramount before even moving the data, or even after you move the data to cloud. So data security posture management solutions, again, depending on the vendor, they have a slightly different coverages, but mostly they give a clear picture on the data asset. Do we know our data? Discovery, classification, identification, how much volume we have. Also, the type of controls we have in our data. Do we have the data, maybe the disk level encryption or volume encryption? Do we have the data where we have even more tokenization, encryption? We can go even further, field level encryption, what we have where. Because as an enterprise customer, isn't it that we struggle if somebody asks us, or if, God forbid, there is a breach or something, and investigators are coming and you have to file 8K, right, in 2 to 3 days. Now SSE is making it very difficult to determine the materiality, and within 72 hours, we have to file something. Now, as a CISO or a security leader and executive, if somebody asks, can you tell me which data was exposed, when, where, and how, what kind of protection you had? It's very difficult for most of the organization. So DSPM solves that problem including the risks of data leakage and unprotected data stores that we have in our environment. Identity security posture management solution, it is also very important. And as we say, identity is the next parameter. These solutions provide information about, do we have the right access, privilege, authorization? We can go into different types of role-based, access-based, attribute-based, but every time we do that, there are human configuration or through automation, and there are gaps in the environment. And to identify those gaps so that the security team can be proactive and they can identify those issues. And the SaaS security, as we talked about, there are specialized tools who actually keeps track of any SaaS provider. The moment they come up with any API or data visibility or any access or log access, they are specialized into that, where your IaaS solution cannot get the right level of visibility. Now, again, as I said, after I submitted that presentation, I saw that, okay, the Kubernetes security posture management is also another term and solution getting prevalent, and there is no end to it, right? I could not just wait the presentation for those tools to come up and then actually submit the final version. So that those things will continue. Some of the key differences, like, again, it's not an architectural difference, but some of the key differences is that focus area we all know, the data collection mechanism. The bottom line for any security posture management solution, it has to work in two ways. I need to know, right, when human body, what is my body's normal temperature, right? Is it 98.4 or 97.6? Once I know this thing and I can have a continuous monitoring and measuring, the moment it goes above that, okay, there is a trigger because I'm deviating from my normal body temperature, which is my normal behavior. Now, that normal can be done two ways. We can have tools, and these days tools are all AI, and tools depend on the model. Tools can continue discovering the different data sets and eventually identify what is the new normal or what is the normal for that data set. And then any deviation from that can eventually trigger an alert and we can detect the problem. The problem with those learning is that, as you know, you go through a learning curve, it's a time consuming thing, and also as you come up with this, it takes a lot of time and a lot of tuning, false positive and all. The other approach which we did in our CSPM solution is try to keep it simple. We don't have to chase after each and every, we have a very strong architecture, relatively strong, I would say, architecture practice in the organization, where we define reference architecture very strong way in a design pattern, then blueprint and the secure configuration guidelines. So we have those baselines. So one way of implementing those posture management solution is that you feed your baseline to the tool, and the tools can go and collect all the information. Anytime there's a deviation, it actually detects and alerts. In case of a CSPM and ASPM, The CSPM is looking into all the cloud audit trail, inventory, cloud trail, whatever we talk about, like collecting all those information and then running those algorithms to see what is the deviation from the baseline pattern, and accordingly it generates an alerts and eventually we take an action. On the ASPM space, mostly the application APIs, there are access to get details and the logs and other information. Eventually, any behavioral change will generate some audit trail or instantaneous alert and log. You collect those information and feed it through the model, and then basically detect what is beyond your normal behavior and eventually start taking an action. ASPM and ISPM, I'm not going into the same. There are a few slides in the presentation where it is exactly, it talks about what is the focus area, what is the data collection points, and eventually what action you can take. ISPM is from all the identity stores and all the policies that we have. It eventually collects. And same with CSPM and SSPM, collecting from the SAS log sources and alerting mechanism, and eventually it helps us to identify what is the normal behavior so that it can detect and alert against those. Future editions, right? As I said, it can be anything. Today we are dealing with this. Tomorrow it can be our network gear, our firewalls. It can be Palo Alto or anything. It can be our IPS system, right? Why don't we talk about doing a security posture management of our network tool or network gear? Why don't we do the same discussion about our endpoint tools? Eventually we have to do it. If there is a deviation from standard configuration, we have to detect it. And if it is not operating in a proper way, we have to detect it and remediate it. Having a CrowdStrike or SentinelOne deployed in our environment is not good enough. If it is not properly configured against our blueprint and the policy, we have to detect it, otherwise it will have a hole in our environment. So in future, we will not be, or we should not be surprised if we see other posture management solutions like network, endpoint, mobile, operating system, or anything like IoTs that come up. But bottom line, it all works with the same principle of collecting the information about how the system is behaving, getting or feeding the baseline normal information, or having those AI tools identifying what is the normal behavior and what is the deviation from the baseline behavior. Before we jump into the actual technical architecture and maybe some of the snippets of the code that we have, just one more slide, which is all about few more terms and terminologies that we should be aware. And every time we meet with a lot of our friends from the vendor community, we hear all those stuffs. CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker. Everybody has some instance. When we went to cloud, we wanted to see where our data is going. Do we have any IT outside IT? All the applications are going to the legitimate destination or not? If we have a lot of bytes out in our log, are we sending to the right destinations, or it is a command and control sending data that we don't know? So that kind of visibility initially started with Cloud Access Security Broker, that platform. Then we have Cloud Workload Protection Platform, detecting vulnerabilities, detecting malicious things, and detecting the posture and remediating it. CWPP platforms came in. CSPM, we talked about deviation from cloud resource and configuration. In Azure, I have a key vault, whether it is configured properly or not. Do I have a separation of duty configured up and running or not? Those will be detected by the CSPM solution. CNAPP is a combination of the CSPM and CWPP, which is combined and in a package. So there are tools which overlap into multiple areas. So every time like the vendor community comes and talks about, I have a CWPP, CNAPP, CSPM and all, it's just to have an understanding that eventually it's a combination that is giving you something that you need. And the Cloud Identity and Entitlement Management solution, which is a sub group of the Identity or ISPM solution, which focuses on identity and entitlement management for the cloud resources. Now, these are all about the tools and technologies or the concepts or the jargons available today in the industry. Now we are going to talk about, and Sunil is going to walk us through, What we did in our environment where we built a custom tool, right, in cloud security posture management, and how it can be extended to the other posture management solutions as well.
Thank you,
I can
Partha.
skip. I mean, I can click it.
Yeah, you talked about so many C's. Now I'm all getting mixed up with so many terms. So till now you heard about security posture management, and Partha talked about cloud, identity, software, application, SaaS, so on and so forth. So here we want to talk about what are those some of the common guiding principles so that which we can follow regardless of what security posture management solution we are talking about. And I'll not take time and directly jump into it. So first is the shift left, making sure that we are moving our detection early in the software development life cycle. So moving it to the left side of it. Zero trust, making sure that zero trust principles are followed regardless whatever technology or tools you are using, making sure that detecting it earlier and following it the zero trust principles. Another important thing is making sure that it is standard driven. We know that what is the standard, what we want to follow, what we want to establish the baseline and detect the normal and abnormal behavior. So that is very important. If we don't know what is the standard behavior, then we cannot detect the where the deviations are. So that is very important as well. Also, as a cybersecurity professionals and leaders, we love the complexity. When we talk about anything, even advising our peer technology team, giving them advice on security, we make it so complex. They're sometimes even afraid and rate it as a blocker, right? So that's another important point to making sure we should keep it simple so that we can implement it properly, we can follow those principles very clearly. Automation is important so that we cannot do it manually, we have to make sure those are automated. Data and integration is important aspect because that's where we get the data from, regardless how you are doing it, part of your solution. So you have to make sure that data and integrations. Another important principle is the risk based, making sure that we are understanding what is the most critical for in our environment, understanding the business and risk context to it. Otherwise, we may be remediating lots of issues and then we are not focused on the critical ones. Actionable is the next one, which makes sure that we detect, but we go and are able to fix them. It's not something we are detecting, we are reporting, but there is no solution to it, we are not able to fix them, or we are not taking the right step to remediate them. Another is open platform or easy integration. So regardless whatever solution you are using it, either homemade or from any other vendor, making sure there is the right integration in the right, so that you are able to integrate with other tools, the cloud providers, applications, SaaS applications, so on and so forth. And I'll jump into the next, what are the different steps to follow. First is as we talked about, one of the guiding principles, define that standard. That's where the most important step and the start of the security posture management is define the standard. Define what is the golden image is, what you want to see in ideal situation.
Sunil, can I just add one
yes,
thing?
Please.
Sorry about that. So in the conversation, so if you think about a product where you have the data or application, there are hundreds of checks and there is no end to it, right? Do you need to do all the checks which are critical? Don't you have any other tool to detect those? So defining what are the top 10, top 20, like even top 30, we have an example given in later in the slide. Those are the top 10 checks must be performed in one SPM solution. And then it becomes very easy to implement in your existing environment or even codify it. So when Sunil was basically telling it has to be risk based, it is, if you do a homegrown solution, you cannot have 300 feature rich, but probably don't need it. So in order to select something which is absolutely needed in our environment, the decision has to be risk based and defining top 10 or top 20 criteria, which also comes from the architectural pattern and the blueprints, which is the starting point.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Partha. So that making sure that we understand what is important for our environment and making sure that we define those and accordingly we can monitor them. The next is collect the configuration data and log and events, making sure that we are able to ingest those, understand what is going in the environment so that we can maintain and understand where are the deviations happening from configuration, making sure that the ideal posture we want to maintain, those are being followed. If there is any deviation that is detected, that's where these feeds will help us. Then we need some kind of a analysis engine which does the analysis and make sure that we are able to detect these events where the deviation is happening. Reporting and dashboarding is another important aspect, making sure that once it is analyzed, now it's reported so the teams can understand it, SOC team can understand it, whoever the engineering teams are using it, they can understand it, and then the next phase is the remediation, making sure that we are putting the right efforts and remediating those issues. Okay, so next is how to really operationalize it. It's around this the last slide, how to follow it, going a little more detail. So when we talk about the XSPM, it's very important to understand what you want to monitor. What you want to monitor and which environment you want to monitor. So that's where it's important to define the targets and controls. The control comes from the standardization. We talked about the standard we have to define. Then we define where our environment is. For an example, do you really want to monitor your dev environment? You may have a QA environment. You may have some other non-production environment. You may want to put less focus on that versus putting more focus on critical data and your operation environment or production environment. Then define those settings, variables, part of the standard configuration so that you can follow those. Analyzing the configuration, again, comparing those settings against the environment, making sure those are there so that you can report on that posture. Reporting and then prioritization for remediation. Thank you. Okay, now let's talk about how and what are the important component of if you are doing it by yourself or you are taking any tool as well, part of this. The start happens with any change happening in the environment. Either you are newly deploying or you already have an environment and now there are some changes happening. Here we are taking infrastructure updates. It could be anything. You are making a change to, let's say, for example, cloud environment. Then you have your XSPM engine, regardless, either as a cloud security or application security or data security. You have defined those parameters what you want to monitor. Now you are putting into your XSPM engine to making sure that you are continuously monitoring them. You can use it any cloud-based technology or any other. For example, here you will see that Azure Function and Lambda is shown from AWS CSP. So that can be used as a feature part of it to build the CSPM capability. You can code them, you can host into those compute resources and scan your environment. And then once you detect it, what are those configuration and settings, then you log into a database to so that you can alert it, providing a real-time alert mechanism or a reporting side of it so that you can create those dashboard. You can depending on if you want to do further assessment, what are the criticality of those, which you want to focus more, any specific environment you want to go and remediate it, and then giving it to the teams who can remediate it. Also important aspect is the fine tuning and continuous improvement in that. So when you start, you may have only 10 parameters where you want to focus on top 10 checks, but eventually as you mature in that practice, you want to make sure that you are covering more and more. That's where you continuously want to monitor what is detected and adding more and more checks to your security posture management.
Right, and also like doing it, this is sort of an inside out with a cloud security provider. For example, when you do it in Azure, what you are doing is that Azure event grade and all audit trails are immediately generated. So when you incorporate your piece of automation, which gets triggered the moment you are spinning up resources, the moment there is a change, say somebody is spinning up a new VM or anything, You get the alert from the event grids immediately. If you have a detection mechanism, it's instantaneously happening. Opposed to the commercial solutions which are relying on APIs, they have a cycle time. They will have to wait. I mean, you cannot query an API, and there is a throttling period as well. You cannot query an API every millisecond or microsecond and hundreds of query on the API, because cloud security provider will eventually identify it as a DOS attack and is going to block it. So there is a limitation for external or even commercial providers who are calling those APIs from an outside in view. So that is why when I said initially, one of the reasons when we went for our internal SPM solution opposed to a commercial solution is time to detect and time to react on those. And we proved we can do it in less than 2 minutes, whereas even the commercial solutions we had took like 9 to 10 minutes because of the limitations of throttling and the DOS attack prevention and all. So here, embedding it inside, it's a pro and cons, it's a balancing act. We cannot have, because we are not a shop where we are developing a product feature, so we cannot have 300 of features, right? We cannot keep pace with external vendors who are actually specializing on this thing, but at the same time, identify the high risk use cases. There could be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 based on your threat intel, your operational intel, whatever you get. You can do a management of checking those conditions using your even the inbuilt solution or homegrown solution if you embed part of your cloud stack, and that will detect it probably 5 times faster than any commercial solution doing outside in polling approach.
Yeah, also I think the most important piece is, Partha, there may be external vendors may have more checks, but here the focus is that you know your environment better.
Right.
They don't know you, right? So you can come up with the right use cases to establish security posture management versus deploying all generic 300 items. And also the focus is to invoke the thought process that these are some of the components how you can build it. Does not mean your solution may look like this. You may have very different solution. You think that, okay, this component does not fit into my strategy. You may have completely different architecture for your security posture management. So the focus is to that thought process. We don't have to buy hundreds of different tools to achieve it. You can have a single unified solution so that regardless whatever technology or domain you want to manage, you can do with the same one set of solution. You can build one solution and extend it to other domains. So this is related to on-prem security posture management, follow the similar guidelines and principle and components. However, the difference is that in the cloud it's more more agile, there's more API based, wherever if you look into our on-premises tool, they don't have that level of functionality where you need to kind of a data driven and you can pull the data. They may not have that level of integration. So that's where you have to understand those security tools. Some of may provide API connection, some of may provide a different type of data sources, so that you can pull the data from those tools. In our traditional systems, they may have some kind of a syslogging, they may have some kind of file transfer where they can send the logs. So it depends on what your strategy, what tools you are monitoring, in which domain you are doing the security posture management, and then accordingly it follows the same principles. Here is a example case study which is related to check the MFA status for Azure Active Directory users. So you want to make sure that your users have all of the MFA checks enabled, right? And if you may find that some of them reports you can generate by the CSP, but in some scenarios you don't have that visibility, who is really those users are. So you take the requirement and you look into the top left, there is a security requirements. The security requirement says MFA must be enabled. That is the requirement you have put into, and you want to make sure now we are continuously monitoring our environment, making sure all the users have MFA enabled. So that's where you take your blueprint or standard or pattern that defines that requirement, and here in the example it is using PowerScript. It connects to the Azure Active Directory, pull the information, identify who are those users which have not enabled it, and tells you exactly the users which have not enabled it MFA, and you can go and take the right action for it. You can report it, dashboard it, and accordingly go and remediate it. The one another important I will highlight here is it is to make sure that you have that right level of integration and defining those targets which you want to focus on. In this case, we may have only one kind of a Azure Active Directory or Azure account, but in case of your on premises, you may have 10 different flavors of resources which you want to monitor on. So defining those target is important, making sure that the right level of integration is there so that you can pull the right data and report on it.
And also, Sunil, if I may add one thing,
Yes,
right?
please.
Like when you have the blueprint where you have a simple, it's not a data model that you define, right? It is like an English statement. Separation of duty has to be established, right? Or MFA must be enabled for all the deployments. Or in order to connect to a critical asset, you have to come through only your certified zero trust network access mechanism, then have to go to a jump host and do this thing. So these are a translation of your organizational standards and policies into more technical details that we define in the blueprint. Then that blueprint has to be codified in some sort of a manifest file which can be validated using the script. So there is no unified answer, one single solution for that. Depending on the use case, there are some deviations which we have to take. But the bottom line is that, are you willing to buy 20 different tools and not integrate and have each tool sending into a Splunk log, creating your own process of managing, maintaining, alerting and all? Or if you don't need it, can you extend your existing thing with a little bit of automation? And as I said, like convert your blueprint to a manifest file, have your script check the manifest file, which should be some key value pair, and then report on the target asset, whether it is on or off, and in that case you get the exact report of what you need. Now representation right now, it shows probably a text file. You can report it in any way. You can use Power BI, whatever it is, right? So that's not the problem. Sorry, Sunil, you wanted to add anything else in this?
No, I think we can go to case study second, and we have only a few minutes.
Okay.
So this is related to database encryption, checking that in your environment all the databases are encrypted with whatever you want to define standard. Let's say take example AES 256. So the requirements are defined that it must be encrypted. Second is it must be AES 256. Now you can define the part of the manifest or code files. Either you're doing .NET or Python, and then have a mechanism to execute it, go into environment, check for it, and then report for it, making sure that it's going into each and every resource which you define as a target, and checking for it and reporting for it. At the end, it will tells you here are the number of databases which are deviation from this standard or these configurations, and here are these which are in green state, which meet those requirements. Yeah, I think we can go to next slide. Thank you. So these are I will not go through each and every line item here, but these slides, these two slides cover the, cloud security posture management, application identity, endpoint network, so that you can understand and get a zeal of what are the different top checks you can define in part of your configuration security posture management.
Yeah, and this is for like what we did. We had to define something because we are creating the code and doing it. External tool integration was not only just cost, operation, maintenance, and integration. Overall, it was more challenging because we do have a principle right now. We are doing tool rationalization so that we can cut down the tool sprawl. So that is why we identified, and in production, you just don't have 10. You will have probably 30, 40, or 50. But these are like some of the examples of define, narrow down what you want to monitor, right? Do not burn calories where you are not getting the right amount of return on your investment. So it's like a product management. Any product company does the same product management decision. Come up with a feature which has more demand. Here, come up with a risk-driven use case where you need to monitor posture, And that has to be aligned with your blueprint. Eventually, you coded it and you already have an automation platform running to pull the data sources from different cloud providers or even on-prem tool, apply that, do a check, generate a report, and you detect it. And it is near real time. You don't have to wait that you run a couple of times a day. It is actually near real time that runs.
Right. Okay. I think we can go to that last slide and then take few Q&A. We just have few minutes.
Okay. So same with like there are like the top 10 things that we implemented. We do have actually even beyond that, as I said, in some cases close to 50, some cases like 40, but these are some of the examples we wanted to share with you that we came up with. Key takeaways. Go ahead, Sunil.
Okay, thank you. So I think we talked about a lot. We started with the tools, different terms, different technical jargons, and that there are different tools working in same space, doing the same functionality for different domains, maybe, network, identity, endpoint, so on and so forth. So I think one of the important point is, if especially you are operating in cloud environment, understanding that what is your responsibility. For example, cloud, if you are, monitoring something, there are a number of responsibilities being taken care by, service providers, so that we don't have to over worry about that, making sure that what we are able to configure, we can monitor that. Identify and evaluate, and making sure that you are able to identify the right components which you want to build in the solution. You don't have to overdo it. You don't have to, understanding that where it's under and over, balancing out that, and doing a step-by-step, identifying the tool, doing some evaluation, doing some POCs, so that you can establish it slowly and define that maturity stage. Earlier we talked about defining those standards, so that's where you identify your security configurations which you want to monitor. You define your security posture which you want to achieve, and then you monitor for it. So doing that standardization is very important. Threat visibility is another important aspect, so that you know what are your threats in the environment, so that you can monitor for those through your configuration, through your posture management. Prioritize remediation. That's the most important thing. Organization may be able to do it, and you see that there are 100,000 issues. Now it's very important to understand what are the important which we want to start with one, right? So doing that prioritization is very important, so that you are able, you have a mechanism, either you're doing some kind of assessment, risk assessment, or other mechanism to define it. Reduce risk profile, so that's certainly proactive, posture management will help to reduce the risks, and so on and so forth. Clear metrics and reporting, because if you don't have defined those mechanism to report and measure it, you will not be able to see that where you are going. Today you had X number of issues, tomorrow you may have X plus 1 or X minus 1. And then lastly, the data-driven decision making sure that you looking into the data aspect and making some decision around it.
Yeah, so if I actually sum it up, what we are talking about is there are a ton of posture management tools, and it all depends on the requirement. It may be perfectly all right for some organizations to buy 8 or 10 different tools, integration and support. It also depends on the organization's size and the capability model, right? Whether do I have any ability to develop something in-house, or I need to go and completely buy those tools. In our environment, we went for a homegrown CSPM tool. We actually built a pretty solid automation framework, and where we start from standardizing our policy and the standards, then codify it in our blueprint. Those things get transferred into a software engine which can check those policies and report back and do our own. Now, we did not build and could not build, because those things were done in last 1 year. We could not build like 500 plus use cases. We prioritize the highest risk or highest return use cases that we can codify, and that covers not only cloud, it can extend into cloud, it can extend into operations, it can extend into our identity. There are many checks which are included with one single platform that we did. So that is why we said X means anything. It can be a unified, And even last 2 days, I've been talking with some of our vendor partners and some of the evangelists, and they're also talking about maybe a product come up with, right, where they're leveraging AI, getting all the data sets and eventually generate a report, and we don't have to buy 5 different posture management solution, because the basic principle is same. It's a matter of the target you apply, it's a matter of how you pull the data, and it's a matter of what baseline you are comparing against. So once these 3 things can be standardized with one single platform, currently we have multiple homegrown automation created for that, but when it can be done with one-stop shop, then probably it will be one solution which can cover any posture management. So I know it's a 5 minutes mark, so we can take or answer any question or even thoughts, or if you would like to share any feedback, so we can definitely do that. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for, I have just question on the, just now you just discussed about the multiple use cases, right? MFA, for example, or database related query, right? So is it possible we can have a consolidated solution so that, only auditing team can monitor, or, maybe incident response team can be monitor that?
Yeah, I mean, like the solution right now we have, it's actually a homegrown platform and automation. The report is generated, and report is again nothing fancy. We are using Power BI, so everything is generated is all in-house Power BI. And that can be used by anybody. Right now, that report is mostly used by our remediation team, who are actually fixing any deviation we are finding. So we are fixing it, and at the same time, we have a team which fixes the root cause of the problem, which is, say, TLS 1.2. That is your standard, and you are finding 50 endpoints or servers not enabling TLS 1.2. You go ahead and tell the server to go and fix it. Next day, you find another 20 coming up. So that means the problem is not there in the server, problem is in the deployment script, which is actually deploying those servers that is defective. So our corrective team, as well as the root cause analysis and remediation team, they have access to those reports, and eventually they work with further left, like trying to find out where the main problem is and how can we remediate that.
So I think it also depends on, from the audit standpoint, it also depends on if you want to detect it, or you may want to implement some mechanism where if something is detected, then you may want to trigger a script or some action or API where it can go and fix it, right? So from the audit standpoint, as long as you can break down that requirement, what you want to check, you can break down and code it, you should be able to do it. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question about introducing new policies. So we have a similar setup, not built ourselves, but if you introduce new policies, our security officers are going to say, oh, my dashboard is going down because the team is not yet deploying new servers or services in a compliant manner. Do you have a way to version policies or reports or certain rules so that they can have like a grace period when a new policy is introduced?
So yes, like all the policy, we do have a periodic check, like all the blueprint and thing that we create, which is derived out of the policy, and it has a shelf life. I mean, there is a governance team which checks if you have an updated policy, was the blueprint updated in last 12 months or not? If the blueprint was not updated, that means your policy says do X, you are still doing the old school way. So they find it, and eventually it's a queue. We manage our work in the agile way, and then we prioritize what needs to be done. But yes, we do have those checks. It's not that you create blueprint once and done, because there is nothing is permanent, everything gets stale if you're not having a periodic governance on it. So that's how we do it. It may not be instantaneously, like you have a new policy come up with, the implementation and checks maybe 3 months down the line, depending on the work queue availability and prioritization.
Yeah, my question is more, how do you reflect that into the report? So do you have 2 versions of the report, one with the newest policies in there and one with just the standard policy that's now enforced, and that those are also added to grace?
That's actually a great suggestion, to be very honest. In our current way, there is no way to report, okay, the new policy says X and our current deviation is Y. Our current deviation is reported against policy A. If the policy has shifted to B, it is like, okay, we have to update it. We don't have any mechanism for that right now.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
We're struggling with that same, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, that's a great.
It's the maturity path that eventually you achieve, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, okay. I can probably come down and we can talk, right? Because I think there's a next presentation. There's a hard stop. Sorry about that. I'm coming, so we'll talk. Thank you.